Our topic this month, I've called it Voices of Wisdom. And the reason I did that is I wanted to bring in, just take a month or so and bring in some of the sages and the teachers and the wise women and men who have gone before, who have shown us how we can awaken our inner life. One of my favorite books, which I'm going to teach the class on shortly, as you know, is Roger Walsh's Essential Spirituality. And when I talked about him a few weeks ago, one of the stories I related was how when he embarked on his spiritual journey, the epiphany he had was that aside from the ritual and the dogma and the theology, the world's enduring faith traditions, one of the things they do and one of the things they are structured to do is train our minds, train us to control our minds so that we can put the reins on these horses, these wild horses, which run away with us so much. And the way they do it, each of them has its own way to help us become aware of the processes of our minds, slow our minds down, and enable us to better connect with the holy here in our everyday experience. At the end of the day, these faith traditions are schools to help us train our minds. And so what I thought I would do this month is just explore some of those practices. What do these faith traditions teach us about training our minds, about finding the holy, and even more important, because we at One World are a community of practice, what are some of these tools that we can bring to bear to do that? So some of you may remember that last November, I went on a silent retreat at Ignatius House. I actually call it my not-so-silent retreat because I was not the most compliant person on the planet. But I have to tell you that I was very affected by Ignatius House itself. Ignatius House is on Riverside Drive. It's a Jesuit retreat center. And it's beautiful when we are allowed back out and when we can drive and go and congregate and do all those things that we love to do. I really encourage you to go and take a visit to Ignatius House. You can do one-day retreats, you can do several-day retreats or even longer, but it's just beautiful for people who are interested in pursuing contemplative aspects of spirituality. It's a great place to go. So anyway, last November, I went to this retreat at Ignatius House, and while I was there, I just became so much more enamored of Ignatian spirituality. So what I would like to do today is talk a little bit about St. Ignatius of Loyola, and in that context, about the exercises he gave us or the practices that tradition gives us to awaken our connection to the holy. So let me start off by just going into who was Ignatius of Loyola. Okay. Like many who travel on the spiritual path, where he ended up is not at all where he began. He didn't begin as a contemplative. He didn't begin as a particularly religious person. He was born in the 16th century as a younger son to a noble family, so he went into the military at the age of 17. He became a soldier. He developed a reputation as being proud, as being violent, as being arrogant. None of those things which later lead you to think that he might become a saint. Life is funny that way. We journey and we change. Anyway, in 1521, he was in a battle and a cannonball hit him and shattered his leg, and he had to go on a long convalescence, and his military career was ended. So as he was convalescing in a monastery, and all he had were spiritual readings. During the course of his convalescence, he decided to commit his life to a spiritual journey. He decided to give up the outer life. He decided to give up his earlier life of wealth and position. So when he was able to travel, he went to a Benedictine monastery in Montserrat, which is outside of Barcelona. And when he was there, he had an epiphany. He hung up his sword. He got rid of his dagger. He traded his clothing for a beggar's clothing. And he went on to continue his inner journey. And what he did in the ensuing years is he helped found the Society of Jesus, known as the Jesuits, and became the superior general of that order for a great many years. Interesting side note, I a couple years ago took a class at Ignatius House, and it was on the Christian mystics, and it was taught by Carl McColman, who's a preeminent author and student of the Christian mystics. In my class, there is a point to the story. In that class, one of the students had been to the monastery at Montserrat, and she came back with a bunch of stones from the place where Ignatius of Loyola hung up his sword and his dagger, and I still have mine here. This is it. I have it on my little altar at home, but I think that is so cool. Do you remember a while ago I talked about doorways to the holy? They call them theophanies, just awarenesses of the holy. And I talked about how there are items in our lives which can bring us closer to the holy. For me, this is a stone, yes, but it's more than a stone because it came from a very holy place, or a place which evokes for me images of the holy or energy of the holy. So I just think that is very cool, and I have it here at home on my home altar as an item that reminds me that we have these doorways in our lives to the holy, whether it be objects or people or moments, and we need to continue to be aware of them. So that's Ignatius. He went from Montserrat on. He ultimately journeyed to Jerusalem and formed the Jesuits. And his greatest contribution was a series of exercises he calls the spiritual exercises. And they're the basis of Jesuit training today. And they're also the basis of a lot of lay training for how to develop a greater awareness of our connection to the holy. I'm not going to talk about the spiritual exercises today, but I'm going to talk about a subset of them, which involves daily reflection of our lives and thinking and just reflecting on how during the day we became closer to spirit, or spirit became closer to us in our everyday experience. So what Ignatius did is not just found an order, but he identified a system of beliefs and a system of practices within the Catholic Church that reflected his view of the divine. If you listen to what I'm about to tell you in terms of what he taught, it sounds very familiar to us at One World. So what did he teach? The first thing he taught is that God is in all creation. God is everything and everywhere. Some of you may be familiar with the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins. He was a Jesuit, and what he taught was the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Think of the energy of that statement. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. Everywhere we look, whether you call it God or spirit or creator or whatever, everywhere you look is charged with the beauty and the grandeur of spirit. Ignatius taught, if you are looking for God, just look around you. Everywhere. Everybody, every bit of creation, everything is charged and full of the spirit of creation. The other thing Ignatius taught was a theology that was practical and engaged. We don't just sit back and look at the beauty of creation. We engage with it. We respond to it. We have a place in it. It is our job to be involved every day and in every moment with this beautiful creation that we have been given. Whether we do it in relationship with people, whether we do it in caring for the earth, whether we do it in creating beauty in art and music or whatever, it is our place to engage with the beauty of creation all around us. Ignatius also gave us a theology that is heart-based, which is pretty amazing for his place and time. He got sideways with the Inquisition a couple times because of this and because of his teachings. He taught his followers to pay attention to their emotions, to their imagination, to what their hearts were telling them. Now, if you know the Jesuits at all, they are among the most educated and the most scholarly of the Catholic orders, but they do not disregard conversations with their emotions and the discerning voice of their inner heart. They understand that in your heart, in listening to your heart, you hear the direction that Spirit is telling you to go. Ignatius also gave us an emphasis on service to others. Father Pedro Arrupe, you may have heard of him. He led the Jesuit order for about 20 years, beginning in 1965. He called those formed by Ignatian spirituality men and women for others. Men and women for others. He said, only by being a man or woman for others does one become fully human. So what is he saying there? He's saying that it's only in service to others, it's only in engaging with others that we awaken the full depths of our humanity, and the full depths of our humanity and our divinity. I think it was St. Irenaeus that said, the glory of God is the human being fully alive. That's us. The glory of God is us being fully alive and engaged and in relationship with each other and serving each other. That is where God comes alive here on earth. St. Ignatius also gave us a theology which is reflective and contemplative. He is known as the father of all retreats. So anytime you go on a retreat, think of Ignatius, or at least a Christian retreat, think of Ignatius. His contemplative teachings call on us to examine our hearts and our consciousness to see how spirit is operating in our lives. It just calls us to be aware of where and how we see spirit in our lives. Finally, Ignatian spirituality emphasizes community and collaboration. What does this mean? It means that our relationship with God is dynamic and it is relational. It's not that we have a dynamic relationship with God, the man up on the cloud. We have a relationship with creation. We have a relationship with each other. We live in community, we serve in community, and in doing that, we, if you will, glorify and amplify and just bring to life the joy of spirit that is at our essence, and the voice of God and the hands of God and the feet of God that we are. We experience spirit daily in our lives here on earth in a relational, give and take way in all things. It's not an abstract sit in solitude and pray. It's get out there, get your feet going, get your hands dirty. That is where we find God, with each other, or in creation, just in looking around and being here now. So the practice that St. Ignatius called central to his teachings was the daily examination of one's day. He called it the daily examen. That's E-X-A-M-E-N. Okay, we are in the day of apps. We are in like App Central. So if you get on your phone, and you look for daily examen, you will find it. You will find many variations of it. You will find ways throughout the day to reflect on your day. Now, Ignatian spirituality or Catholicism or Christianity is obviously not the only faith tradition that emphasizes this reflection. You know, I love the Greek Stoics. The Stoics are adamant about reflecting on your day every day. Greek philosopher Seneca wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent," okay, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. Marcus Aurelius kept journals. He would sit on the battlefield and just write journals because he understood the importance of every day taking a few minutes, and it's not easy. I try to do it and I don't always manage, but taking a few minutes just to reflect on your day, what you felt, how you showed up. It's a wonderful clarifying moment, and a lot of faith traditions, including St. Ignatius, including the Stoics, and many others, recommend it. So back to the daily examen. When this practice began, it was called an examination of conscience, back when Ignatius started it, and in many generations or many years after that. And what it was an opportunity to look at what in your day you had done well, what in your day you had done poorly. Over the years since then, it's expanded, and it's become what some call an examination of consciousness. It's an examination of our awareness. It's an examination of the totality of how we showed up that day. It's widened and it's expanded. It's become a reflection on how we have noticed or permitted the operation of spirit in our lives. And just as an interesting side note, the way this practice has changed, it's expanded, it's modified to fit the needs of changing generations, really is a wonderful example of how our faith traditions modify, how they grow, how we can use them, how we can modify them to fit our own spirituality. It's not the same as it was 200 years ago or even 50 years ago. It's a great example of how these, at their best, are living traditions that continue to feed us as we continue to try to find the holy in our own lives. So the basic elements of the daily examen can be modified. They come all over the place. As I was researching one today, I found one that's designed just for the coronavirus. How to reflect upon your day in the time of this coronavirus. That's not the one I'm going to use, but it's out there, and if you're interested, I will send it to you. The examen I'm going to share with you today is from an article by Father Dennis Ham, who is a Jesuit and an author and a theologian living and working in Omaha. He's adapted it for us to reflect on how we have found God in our day. His article is called, and I love it, his article is called Rummaging for God, Praying Backwards Through Your Day. Okay, so what is this image of rummaging? He takes the image of a drawer that has a ton of stuff in it, and it's all jumbled up, and you are looking in it for something you know is there. You just keep moving stuff around, looking for something you know is there. That's the image he uses for as we sit at the end of the day and sit and reflect for spirit in our lives. It's a great image. Think about it. Our days have been so full. They've been full of activity, conversation, coming and going, ups and downs, kids, dogs, whatever. Even as we sit at home, they are still full of things going on. So at the end of the day, what do? We look at that drawer, we look at all the stuff that's been going on, and we just start rummaging around for where spirit has been in our lives, where we have been, how have we done, where did we connect with God, where did we show up well, where did we show up not so well. It's a wonderful image. I really love it. So here are the steps that he gives us to rummage through our daily drawers and find out where spirit was, where we connected, where we might have connected better, and what spirit was saying to us in the course of the day. The first step he gives us is open to the light. He calls it pray to the light, and you can call it whatever you want. Just open yourself up with that willingness we've talked about to sense the presence of spirit in you. We've talked about an openness, a willingness to just say, I am here and I am willing, and to let the presence of spirit just fill you, suffuse you, just warm you. Just open yourself up for a moment to be willing for the presence of spirit to be felt in your awareness. Opening to the light. The next step he gives us is review the day with gratitude. Now, in earlier versions of the examen, this is the time when you would examine the day to see where you had fallen short, to see where you had sinned, to see where you had done something amiss. Again, because these practices are living practices, what he has changed this into, what he has developed this into, he and others, is an opportunity to search for those gifts during the day that we might otherwise have overlooked. Ham says that gratitude is the foundation of our whole relationship with God. So what do? We use this time just to look for those gifts of creation, those gifts in our day that because we're moving so fast, we might otherwise have missed. Gifts of family, gifts of contact with friends, even in our physically isolated time. gifts of beauty outside, whatever, a poem, a book, music, anything. What have been those gifts during the day that we may have overlooked, for which we are grateful? Challenges, even difficulties, anything that showed up in our day that gives us opportunities to grow and for which we are grateful. The third step he gives us is to review the feelings that surface. Again, back to our emotions. Review the feelings that surface as we review our day. No judgment, no fear, no running, no, I like that feeling, I don't like that feeling. Just sit and breathe with the feelings that come up as you review your day. Give yourself a space to just sit and examine the emotions that arise. Ham teaches that the emotions that arise when we sit and let them arise are the ones that we need to take awareness of. The way he puts it, he says, those are where the action was. Something was going on, and something needs to be noticed. So just take a minute and see what they are. The fourth step is to take one of those emotions, one of those awarenesses that rose up in the earlier step, and just sit with it with awareness. Find out, without fear, no judgment. It's hard to do if these are very strong emotions or if these are very pressing. But it is telling you something. So listen to what is going on in your heart with that emotion. Take it out and just ask it what it is telling you. And just sit and continue to breathe. There is a gift in there somewhere. There is a message, perhaps, in there somewhere. This is the point where you can ask Spirit to tell you what message is here. What does this emotion mean? What is behind it? What do you do with it? As you continue to just breathe through those moments. The final step is to look toward tomorrow with gratitude. You just look toward what is going on tomorrow. What feelings arise as you think about the opportunities you face, the challenges you face, the joys that may be coming? What emotions arise as you think about your day tomorrow? This is your opportunity to form your intention, to be grateful about the gifts that are coming tomorrow, and just as importantly, to release the outcomes for tomorrow, because we don't have any control over the outcomes. We just are grateful for what is coming. We set our intention to show up as we want to show up. We are grateful for what's happening and just release the outcome. Because if we become attached to the outcome, that is where we tend to lose control, because we cannot control that. So let's put our focus where it matters. How we show up, the energy we put into it, the devotion we bring to our lives, the kindness we bring to others, whatever we can do. And then we release the outcomes, because we don't have any control over those. So those are the 5 steps that constituted Father Ham's daily examine. There are so many places where you can go and look at different steps to take to reflect upon your day. These are just some that I liked in the context of Ignatian Spirituality, which offers us opportunities for reflection, for gratitude, for intention setting, and for discernment, and also for service. It's a wonderful, it's got a wonderful energy behind it. When you bring to it your own individuality, your own heart, and your own way to modify these practices to meet your individual journey. The other thing that before I close, I want to encourage you to do is one of the things I did to get ready for this talk was read a little more about Ignatius of Loyola. And one of the cool things that we can do while we are at home is just read a little more about these people who brought us these different faith traditions or these different practices or these different beliefs. They are, we tend to think it's just kind of handed to us on a platter. Here is Catholicism, here is Ignatian spirituality, here is Franciscan spirituality, but it's not. These were people who started off as something very different, who grew up, who struggled, who suffered, who took missteps, who just lived lives and gave us these insights which are just game changers for us. So if you have some time, read some of these biographies. They're just fascinating because they give you a lot of insight into how these traditions developed and how some people in their individual journeys find the holy in places they never even expected to. So I'd like to close with a poem by Father Pedro Arrupe, who, as I said, was head of the Jesuits for about 23 years. And this is what he writes. Nothing is more practical than finding God. That is, than falling in love in a quite absolute, final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the mornings, what you will do with your evenings, how you will spend your weekends, what you read, what you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything.